Hello, everybody, and I hope you have your beverage to wet the whistle. It's a very special spring coming upon us. That's wet the whistle. Oh, we got an echo going on here. I got one more. Very special spring coming upon us. That's wet the whistle. Oh, we got an echo going on here. That was that other guy. Yeah, I had a window open. What was I going to say? Oh, yes. It's interesting that we happen to be having this event today, and Kumbh Mela is going on in India, where millions of people go to bathe in what they consider to be the sacred river, uh, the Ganges. And so we say hello to them, and I hope that they receive the blessings that they can receive from that. If you take that impulse back, it leads you to a few thousand years BC and the beginning of what is known as the Lesser Age of Kali Yuga. And that began with the departure of Krishna after he had given the instructions on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, to Arjuna. And he was giving them instructions to help make it through the dark night of the age of iron, the age of Kali Yuga, which the lesser Kali Yuga came to an end in 1899, according to Rudolf Steiner. And so now that we have that ending coming so soon after the fall of the spirits of darkness from the astral world through their defeat by Archangel Michael, so that we entered into the age of Archangel Michael, I thought it would be fitting if we would be able to take up the task, so to speak, of wielding the sword of Michael. And I was trying to find my sword, and all I could find was my rapier. So you'll have to see my sword at another time. But in that regard, the sword of Michael is the sword Rudolf Steiner had once said to Walter Johannes Stein, the great Grail researcher, who was a mentor of one of my mentors. And he wrote 9th century world history in the light of the Holy Grail. And if anything we're doing here, we're on a quest. And it's that whole spirit of riddles and seeking that leads you into the future. While Lucifer would like to draw you back into past old forms and systems of organization and structure, and Ahriman would like to insert into mankind's culture impulses that are more appropriate further in the future. He likes to make things come early. And so we're beset with these two difficulties: people working with old forms in their mindset and attempting to insert advances in technology and so on and so forth, for which mankind is ill-equipped at this point to be able to deal with in a wholesome way. And so that's very much of a challenge. So what are we to do? And I posted a quote the other day, and I kept it in my phone here. If you please humor me for a second here while I bring it up. Yeah, it's from Rudolf Steiner, February 25th. Or no, the quotation, excuse me, was in 1905. But he says, the feeling of hate must disappear in us. Otherwise, it reappears as a feeling of fear. For fear is suppressed hate. We must transform the hate into a feeling of love, the love of wisdom. And people struggled with that. Some people struggle with that in trying to grapple with how fear and hate are basically two different modalities of the same lower realm of being. And in dealing with all this, we're dealing with multiple states of being that interpenetrate. And the greatest struggle that people have is due to the fact of that they think all this is real. They think they really are a physical being living in this solid world of physicality. And as the Indians in the celebrating the Kumbh Mela would wholeheartedly assert in the affirmative, this is Maya. This is an illusion. This is a dream. And the history that we've been told, we can quote Napoleon Bonaparte. He says that history is a fable convenue. History is a fable convenue. It's something that's basically an illusion that's agreed upon. And so in saying, well, what could that mean? If you take that to a deeper level, where Rudolf Steiner mentions the fable convenue, he says that because people that treat history have no concept of the evolution of consciousness, they can't come into a rightful relationship to history. And also because they don't understand the interpenetrating realms of spiritual beings that play a role in the unfolding of history, they can't interpret it, and they think that, like the ancient Egyptians, are just guys like us, that they just don't have enough information to be able to figure out what's going on, so they make stuff up. And nothing could be further from the truth. But we no longer have those faculties in the same way as the ancient Egyptians. So for us to enter into what they think they meant is very difficult, because we don't have the faculties of dreamy clairvoyance that was still available to the ancient Egyptians, so that we can't really get into what they thought they meant in the same way. And to get into a deeper understanding of how Michael would play such an important role, we can go back to the time of Alexander the Great, in which Alexander, with his mentor Aristotle, was able to conquer the known world. And in doing that, bring a new faculty of thinking that superseded the thinking that was so vivid in Egyptian consciousness, what was now going into a more realm of abstract thinking and logic, and the Aristotelian formalism that came in with Alexander, which was a move forward, because we needed to have that in our quiver of the arrows of thought. And so it's important to see this not in terms of so much that you want to disparage anything, but that you understand how this is something that's unfolding. And I remember a conversation I was having over dinner with Timothy Leary that I had mentioned on other occasions. And he said, caterpillars don't understand butterfly language. And I think that that's a very apropos here, even though he was locked into that scientific, abstract view of matter, but yet he acknowledged he couldn't explain my experience of leaving my body fully consciously with his model of consciousness, because his model is dependent on scientific, modern science is abstract intellectual impulse based on material formulas. And when you start dealing with things in terms of materiality, like, for example, in understanding the human body, they base that on dissecting corpses. Well, corpses aren't alive, so that's not the same thing as a living person, because the interpenetrating multiple states of being have vacated the premises. It's like the vehicle. It's a car for you to experience your karma. So this body that you see, the reason that you're in this relationship with it, you have eyes, you have ears, and you can taste things and smell things and all. These are your relationship and the sense of touch to the physical world. And but these are tied into certain processes that are very limited in their ability to be able to perceive. And so people say, well, if this talk about the supersensible relationship to the spiritual world, that, well, I don't see that stuff. Well, no, you don't, because you have to develop the faculties to be able to perceive in that realm. And the challenge in modern time in which we live, in the age of the consciousness soul, or the spiritual soul, as Rudolf Steiner also described it, especially since 1879 with the archangelic period of Michael beginning, that we have to be able to start to see people as supersensible beings. And in striving to look upon people that you run into as not just this meat sack that's walking around and talking, but that you see through things, see into things, to see the supersensible reality that's behind it, that's the true reality, and that you are of spirit and of soul and of body. And that physical part of which you think you see when you look at somebody, that's the least part of a person. I mean, even just looking at the physical body itself, it's 80 to 90% fluids, so that the actual physical uh, structure before you is what you have: some bones, and your eyes are quite physical because they're relating to physical light, and you have certain physical processes that take place in your ears because you're experiencing the movement of the air. And so all these sensate experiences can have they've kind of hypnotized us into thinking that that's all that's going on. And it's important to keep in mind that through bringing yourself to thinking about the supersensible being and destiny of your individual nature, your I am, that through that process of bringing it to your awareness, you begin to develop the faculty to be able to make it an experience that you perceive. And that's the whole ball of wax right there, because Lucifer would like us to go off into some he'd be happy enough if we just went off into some vague, dreamy, mystical realm, and Ahriman, he just wants us to turn into a machine, basically, to become just material beings, and totally eliminate the realms of spirit and soul. Of course, the realm of spirit was eliminated from mankind in the realm of thinking back in 869 AD at the Eighth Ecumenical Council, where they said that the human being is just body and soul, that there was no human spirit that is expressed in the Pauline doctrine of the threefold doctrine of body, soul, and spirit. And so they negated that principle and brought us into an abstract understanding, because they put the church in place of spirit. And that's the rub. And at this time, it's important to understand that there is no being that can come between you and Christ. That's a completely personal relationship. It's completely available, but it's something that you have to come to of your own free will and accord. It's because if it comes to you through forceful means, if you must, then you see it's coming from those other realms. And I keep harping on that, but I shall is very different from I must. And you can look at the abstract principle and think about, for example, in mathematics. If you say 2 and 2 is 4, you're going to get universal agreement with people that are being honest or that are aware enough to be able to see what your point is. Okay, so that's very much the case in that realm, that 2 and 2 is 4, and that's something that's like a gift of Lucifer, to be able to come to that sort of an understanding. But to be able to go beyond that, because that's something that dwells in the head, and the head is like the domain of Lucifer, you have to be able to take the forces of the heart and warm the thinking and bring into being artistically, basically, this imaginal realm that's based on realities. Because as you contemplate the realities of the supersensible beings, the angels, the archangels, the archai, and all the choir of beings, you come to an understanding. But it has to be done in the proper way, because it's threefold. If it's not threefold, you will be subject to all the illusions that you see people struggling with. And it pains me to watch the way people deal with the subject of evil, good and evil, because the manner in which they're pursuing it is, they confuse Lucifer and Ahriman into one being, and they just call him the devil or Satan or whatever name they want to use. But it's important to understand that these are two completely different beings with different agendas, but they're perfectly happy having us confused as to their true nature. And even Goethe and Faust, he doesn't get it right. So Mephistopheles is a mixture of Lucifer and Ahriman, whereas the first part of Faust is more Luciferic. He wrote it when he was younger, and the later part of Faust is more Ahrimanic. He wrote it when he was older, but nonetheless, he hadn't come to that distinction, even though there are documents you can see that show that this was a distinction that was known in earlier times, but was lost. And so you have this whole idea of the Luciferic character of some fundamentalist thinkers, the way that they approach this mystery of evil, because they don't have a threefold understanding of the balance point that Christ maintains in you as your I am, or your true ego. You know, like even like in German, you know, back in the development of the German language, the word for I is ich. Okay, ICH, and it was directly taken by one of the Gothic leaders that converted them from the initials pertaining to Jesus Christ, ICH. It's each. So the German word for I is the monogram of Jesus Christ. So that shows you that there's some thinking going on there that's of a profound nature. And so, with that being said, that's just a few seed thoughts I thought I'd throw out there. And I'm so happy to see Reverend David William Parry today. And I know that he's excited. He's got an important transition happening on the morrow. And so congratulations to him. And hello, David.
Yeah, I confess a lot of my thinking is on my nuptials tomorrow. But this is one of the high points of my week, so there was no way this show couldn't go on. And it's always a pleasure to be speaking with you, John. I mean, as usual, you've said so much. Talking about science, I remember Carl Sagan. It might surprise some of our viewers, but I actually like Carl Sagan, that international phenomenon, who said many years ago, science was a way of thinking more than a body of knowledge. And that elated me and depressed me at the same time, because science can mean so many things. And I don't think he was simply talking about the reductive materialism that now runs rampant under the name of science. Science can be many things and done in many ways. I suspect, however, he was veering towards that. So that's a bit depressing, which equally made me think of Rabelais, one of my great heroes, Francois Rabelais, who, of course, is a friar who wrote Gargantua and Pantagruel. Aleister Crowley, who claimed to be the notorious black magician, claimed that was one of his previous incarnations. He wishes. Rabelais came up with that incredible statement. Science without conscience is the ruin of the soul. And I think that's really the maxim of our present day, and that's gone missing. It's the guideline, it's the guide time that's gone missing. We need that back. Oh my God! All the way from Arjuna and Krishna. I think Krishna, in a sense, is despite what I was saying last week, I should have been more precise. Is sort of analogous in certain ways to the figure of the Christ. It's above Brahman. He is above Brahman. And I remember reading the Rig Veda, which of course is simply a part. It just means, the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita simply means the Gita recapitulated. I remember reading all of that in the Rig Veda many, many years ago and thinking, those are strange descriptions. When Krishna is firing his arrows, very, very strange. Not that I'm given to such things, but if I didn't know better, they sound a bit like missiles, slightly more than arrows. Not that I'm given to all of that, but I did notice that at the time. It strikes me of these alien boys, the ones that are looking for alien life everywhere, not the ancient aliens madman. I can never remember his name, with the wild curly hair, that thinks if it moved in the past, it must have been a mistake. It must have been an alien that people misunderstood. I can never remember his name. Bloody grow up, man, for God's sake. And also the aliens he was describing seemed so 20th century. I remember him talking on one of the shows about Vikings and so on. He didn't know anything about Nordic culture, and if people were talking about Thor and Odin in the past and wearing feathers on their helmets, I mean, did the Vikings actually say that? And they were flying through the air. I don't remember them saying that at all. What they were actually talking about were ancient aliens wearing walkie-talkies, for God's sake, man. So they've only got walkie-talkies then. Why haven't they evolved way beyond that? But apart from that, and I can't remember, there was somebody, you'll know, John, the man that originally started, I can't remember his name. He was very rude to me once at a conference I was trying to organise. Not Graham Hancock, way before him. He was called a couple of years ago a Hindu creationist, which I thought was one of the best descriptions of this particular guy I'd ever come across. He takes it all literally, which is not really doing the multi-level texts of India justice, because they are genuinely multi-level. They're astonishing. So yeah, I mean, there's all that going on. I'm trying to remember all the other things you said. Yeah, so I'm facing my nuptials tomorrow. It's a time of reasonable pressure. I mean, we've got the Nephilim Anthropology Conference in about 3 weeks. I'm hoping to drag you into it next year. We've got to remember, at the end of the day, it's a church fundraiser at a very strange time. because we might actually be extending our range beyond Metropolitan Community Church. We might actually be going into the Congregational Federation, which is where I had a church in the past. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm some sort of Congregationalist, and that's another story. So we might be doing that, but the church, you know, is still Valentine's Hall. It's a church fundraiser. It's a 3-year-long project. What I didn't want this year were talking heads. I think I've said it to you before. You know, well, Professor, what do you think of the Masoretic text in the 2nd century? Well, Professor, I'm pleased you asked me. We get no audience. I'm sorry, it's that simple. We get no audience. This is designed to be interesting and raise some money. So we've got a wonderful range of speakers this year, but it's only 2021. We're going to do it over a 3-year period. And as I say, if I get my way, you'll be on the panel next year. Though we're trying to keep most of the panelists, I think, and go through the whole sort of a vehicle, the great war chariot of Arjuna, and take it into greater and deeper ways of expressing itself. Every time you squint at the screen, I get increasingly worried. I'm saying some of that because one of the panelists this year is the Reverend Jim Wilhelmsen, who people find it a shock that someone like me has friends in the Bible Belt who are conservative evangelicals. Yes, I have friends who are conservative evangelicals. It just means we disagree about certain things. It doesn't mean we can't be friends. Jim is astonishing, a straight-laced true blue, that's the bit I disagree with, true blue Christian, because I think there's slightly more to it than that, but I respect him to the end. Wrote a remarkable book called Beyond Science Fiction. He is more or less convinced that Adolphus, that Austrian alchemist about 70 years ago, Adolphus Hentler or something, young Adolf, he was convinced he's the Antichrist. Well, I mean, there's a pretty good pedigree there, let's face it. And one of the reasons is that all of these mass slaughters happened because he was a theosophy nut, a theosophy freak. I think that's a bit harsh. I rather like Madame Blavatsky, and I rather like theosophy. In fact, my own work is veering back in that direction at the minute, because there is such a thing as Christian theosophy, of course, and the Theosophical Society. And I love you, Theosophical Society. You know, I mean, you did take it really from earlier Christian sources, let's face it. I'm being pushed and forced and cajoled into the position as producer convener, not a position I want to be in, but that's another story in itself, of probably defending a theosophical view of the Nephilim. Oh, how did that happen? Whereas Jim, of course, is probably going to attack Madame Blavatsky and indeed or theosophy generally. The selling point will be he's addressing us from his private museum. I can't remember if he still lives in Roswell. I mean, he had a ministry in Roswell at some point. And so certainly he's going to be taking us through this wonderful collection of bizarre curios, whereas you know, whether I like it or not, I'm going to have to say a few kind words about Blavatsky. Certainly the giants come up in The Secret Doctrine, where she's very regarded. I mean, I'm an admirer of The Secret Doctrine. Sometimes it's 2 volumes, 700 pages each. Sometimes it's 4 volumes. It's hard to convince yourself. It's hard to envisage a single author being behind that. I mean, it is quite extraordinary. And that's a masterwork, of course, on top of Isis Unveiled. But I think The Secret Doctrine brings it out. And I accept everything Steiner said. It tends to leave the Western mysteries out, and it tends to leave the unique presence of Christianity to the side, or wants to marginalize it, or wants to draw it into a Hindu system. I accept all of that, but I still think there's something majestic about that view. Also, her view of hidden masters, which, if anybody's read the book carefully, actually makes a lot more sense. It doesn't make as much sense to me with Alice Bailey, who I also find very interesting. Alice Bailey channeled all those writings at the end of the day. She claims, from a Tibetan adept who was in telepathic communication with her, I think there's great knowledge in those books, but that makes me a little more uncomfortable. Whereas if you're looking at what Blavatsky actually said, not only did she travel extensively in those areas, she was a traveler, an astonishing woman in an age when women couldn't travel. That's the end of it. You know, it's her and Madame Alexandra David Neal. How did they do that? It wasn't possible. And then, but there's sort of the Russian I quite like a great deal. Get out my way. I mean, that's a British attitude I can sort of cope with. Get out my way, or you'll get a bunch of fines. I can sort of cope with that one. And her view of the masters, of course, is people who are technically skilled at something. I mean, you have to read the books carefully. They come round for tea. They have supper with her sometimes. And, the whole mystery surrounding the secret valley. Well, hang on, you can work out where it is and who is there. I mean, she basically means the Rabindranath Valley near Nepal. She basically means that. And as a dear friend of mine, Vladimir Wiedemann, I'm sorry to go on about the conference a bit, but it seems to overlap what you said. He's the sort of the mastermind behind the new anthropology, because he was involved in all of that in Moscow, the University of Moscow, in the Russian, the Soviet universities, they were in those days, which, as I said previously, never made it to the West because it was still the time of the Cold War, and some marvelous knowledge and marvelous people never made it over here. So he was there, and he's trying to bring the new anthropology to our screens and to our deliberations. And I mean, he went to that particular valley, and he's met people who spent 60 years in meditation, and he's met people who spent 40 years mastering certain techniques. So how can you honestly say these people are not masters? How do people get results? Science gets such amazing results from the great scientists because they spend so much time in the lab. It's that simple. Why do Christians get next to zero results nowadays? Because they're busy pouncing around like Joel Osteen, making a career out of himself. Yes, I'm jealous. How do you get all those acts on your show? I'm completely jealous. But let's face it, how many hours do you spend in prayer and meditation? That's where you put the hours in, not putting on these wonderful events. So, and until the church remembers, and you're completely correct, remembers its calling, which it has forgotten, that it's all about Christ Jesus as our savior, and then there's nothing we can do but follow him, apart from putting the hours of prayer and meditation and all of the things that help make that attachment, that relationship, 1,000 times more real. I made the confession last week, I'm some sort of crypto reformist. I mean, for me, Luther tends to do it a lot more, because he wouldn't say nothing is happening during the Eucharist. And of course, we're coming up to Easter. He certainly would have believed in the real presence. He wouldn't have believed in transubstantiation. He would have thought that was something like Catholic superstition, or that was a bit harsh. Whereas if you get to someone like Calvin, there's still vestiges of that thinking there, but he's veering away to commemorate, the commemoration, the meal of commemoration, something commemorial. I mean, so that's interesting too, but I don't know. I think Luther's hit the line there. I mean, I don't know how to develop all of this. Certainly that, because I could be here for half an hour, and I'm trying not to be, because we develop slots. We give each other slots. What I was saying about last week, I think, and what I'm saying now, that there's nothing you can do apart from hold on to the robe, the skirts of Christ. There is nothing. That's my humble view apart from that. It doesn't mean the machinery should be forgotten. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't search the scripture daily. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't take the Valentinian meditation classes I try to put on. It doesn't mean we don't go to church bake-offs. It doesn't mean we don't socialize. By the way, if you're just an independent Christian, you're afraid of church life, with all of its checks and balances and all of its backstabbing and all of its whinging, because that's when where you learn to be a bit more humble. It's very easy to be a lotus blossom if you're on your own and don't have to take the artillery and backstabbing of people around you, when it's your duty to try and become family with them. That is what Christ Jesus asks us to do, warts and all. You know, and none of us are saints. You are required to become family. Love and wisdom, that's what we're all meant to be doing. So certainly people shouldn't, you know, faith alone saves you. But even as Luther said, but let's do some good works anyway, because it doesn't hurt, does it? And maybe that's the important thing to remember, including reading all these other religions and taking a healthy interest in science. I have learned so much through reading other scriptures. I mean, certainly it's given me a much deeper insight into my own. And, you know, tart comments by people like Sagan, dare I admit it, as you know, I'm in with the Cambridge Atheists. I don't know how. And as I said before, it's something to do with the fact I was so rude about Billy Graham's last visit to Britain. I'm sorry. There is more to the scripture than leading the American lifestyle. As much as I'd love and admire the American lifestyle, I do. Give me the green card and I'll be over there like a shot. But nevertheless, there's a lot more to leading the Christian life than that. So I think that was the attachment. I think they made me an honorary member or something like that. Looking at the sciences, admiring their knowledge, but always remembering there is a transcendental point above the natural. And that is really what Christianity is trying to reach, which is why I've no beef with the pagans. I've no problem with all these heathens. I've no problem with people searching for faith. Aren't we all? I've no problems with people taking roundabout routes, trying to understand what all this means. That's healthy. That's not unhealthy. Think about your faith. Be kind. If you're not being kind, you don't understand Christianity. Even unbelievers, some of the moral giants I've met have been unbelievers. They dwarf all of us. Maybe the Holy Spirit has put people like that in your path to teach you a lesson, not to prove them wrong. You know, and I don't know, is when you mention science like that, I'll just finish with a UFO comment and I'll hand you back. When you mention, you know, science like that, I just keep thinking of the great luminaries of science and the fact that most modern science is either built through dreams or intuitions or visions. I mean, let's face it, the scientific elite that have made modern science what it is. I mean, they're practically in mystical states all the time, including Einstein, you know, trying to work out what it all means. That's healthy mysticism. UFOs. This conference isn't going to look at UFOs, although they're there somewhere. They're there somewhere. I am getting reasonably interested. I confess I don't know what it all means. It's a biblical mystery, isn't it? In Genesis 6. And I'm getting more and more interested in the fact that the Watchers are not really described in the way angels are. I'm beginning to think there might be two other places in Scripture where you're not looking at angels, and therefore, okay, that does beg the issue. What are you looking at? And the fact that they can do things, they have to engineer the way they do things. Angels don't need to do that. Angels are powerful spirit beings. They don't need to do anything like that. So why are these Watchers doing things in a progressive and deceptive fashion? And they're leading people into their view of life and the sciences and the arts. I think that's incredibly interesting. One of the posters we put up for the conference, then I'll hand back, was of a Watcher. It's a bald-headed purple chap. We spent ages looking for this image, you know, clearly an alien. And the little, you know, the talk bubble, the caption is where he's saying to his human listeners, of course he did, or something along those lines. But that's the whole story of Genesis 6 in one caption, you know, and with a gullible, much more innocent humanity falling prey to experienced entities that may have known exactly what they're doing. Oh my God, am I falling for the whole narrative? Maybe. I'll hand back to you, John. I prefer, however, a theosophical approach. The floor is yours.
Well, gee, the circuitous conversations we have are quite remarkable. So, yeah, Rudolf Steiner made a very poignant remark regarding atheism. He said that atheism was a form of illness, and that for somebody to not recognize the Christ was a tragedy. And so that's a pretty powerful statement. But so you want to be able to get behind, well, what did he mean by that? Rudolf Steiner was not anti-science. He's a scientist. He's just trying to use a finer distinction regarding how laws become applied. And when you get into the laws of the mineral realm, to just take the laws of mineral realm and then extrapolate into other realms, that's a desire for closure and to be able to complete the thought. It gives you a sense of satisfaction. There, I figured that out. It's like, which is an illusion, because the mineral things of this world do have mineral laws, and they have been studied by science, and they've uncovered a great deal regarding all of that. But as soon as you get up even just to the plant realm, they lose their way. And it's something that's of the future, really, is when science begins to come to a relationship with the realm of the living. And then you go beyond the realm of the living into the realm of the anima, or animals, that which has movement. The astral realm is involved. And these realms, to be approached from spiritual science, have to be considered on their own terms. And so to try and extrapolate, and you get so many people you see attempting to delve into these realms and take basically concepts from the mineral world and transplant them into the etheric world or the astral world. And you have this really skewed idea regarding those realms. And it's tricky because there's subtle distinctions, and like space and time, for example. Our skewed relationship to time is through the intervention of Lucifer. Our skewed relationship to space is through the intervention of Ahriman. And yet, if you look in scientific literature, they're always taking space and time and using that to determine velocity. When Rudolf Steiner makes the point, when actually the thing that's real is velocity. The time and the space aspects of it are the parts that are illusory. And so just to think about that thought for what, 30 or 40 years, and see what you come up with. And that's the challenge. And it's really too much trouble for some people. Like the other day, I posted that quotation regarding fear, and this person, I'm not going to point her out, although now you know it's female because I said her, but she said, that Rudolf Steiner was too verbose. And okay, well, maybe it's not for her, and that's fine. And that's the important thing to understand, is the freedom that is attached when you come into a Michaelic school of thought. And now, if I could, I'd like to share something with you from Dr. Steiner himself. Michael is the spirit of strength. In entering into human evolution, he must empower our capacity to see, not on the one hand, an abstract spirituality, and on the other, what consists of matter which we can thump and cut up, and of which we do not realize that it is, in fact, only an external manifestation of what is spiritual. Michael must permeate us as that strong power which is able to see through matter by seeing within it both what is material and what is spiritual, so that the spiritual is everywhere, seen in what is material. So that's the challenge, is to be able to, not that you're going to dismiss the material world, but be able to look deeper into it and see that there's the spiritual aspect of the material world, that the material world is manifested through the activity of spiritual beings in the spiritual world, manifold spiritual beings. And so if you get into your whole thing about all the other worlds in the universe, and you say, are there any inhabited planets like in the universe? And you look at, and if you're seeing something, you look up in space and you see like a star. The reason you see a star is because there's beings there. And the star is a result of the activity of beings. And so if there's a planet or a star or even a moon, it's a result of the activity of beings. They're not necessarily physical beings, but there's beings present that have caused that consolidation of a planet or a star or a moon. And so that's part of the challenge, because we have such a material concept of the world that's been given to us throughout our whole life. And anthroposophy is difficult enough, which is why you don't see analysis of Rudolf Steiner that's critical of any depth, because it's too hard. It's just it's more difficult to study anthroposophy than it is to study physics. I'm perfectly comfortable saying that. And in fact, Rudolf Steiner had said it himself, because when you're dealing with multiple states of being that go through variations within space and variations within time, it's something that's an ever-changing landscape that has to be approached from continually different vantage points, depending upon where you are and what time it is. And then that's not even to mention those things that belong really and live in the world of duration beyond space and time. And so when the beings, the luciferic impulses, come from the realm of the retarded spirits of wisdom, then you find that you have this insertion of this illusory relationship to the realm of time. And that is the challenge, whereas the further you get away from Earth, the less applicable are the rules that are applying on Earth, because we're in our particular point in time. And so in coming to like what you're talking about with your conference, it's the problem I have with most investigators in that realm is they want to see everything as like this ongoing, continuous evolution, whereas the evolutionary schemata is cyclical. Things come into being and go out of being, like that, like David just did. Here he is. See? You went into pralaya, into rest, and then you came back. And so our current world in which we live, our human realm, is where we develop that Christ in you. And just as there are angels, archangels, and archai, if we go back one planetary evolution before the Earth, this present Earth, you have old moon, and that's where the angels went through their human realm. And if you go one period, planetary period before that, that's where the archangels went through their human realm, and old Saturn is where the archai, the spirits of time or spirits of personality, as they're variously called, went through their human realm. And so those are proto-human realms. But you'll find that the only part of man that is reflective of that earliest stage of old Saturn is the head. The head is old Saturn, the middle old sun, and then the limbs old moon. And I'll give you that as a riddle. You can look that up in your occult science. But in coming to understand that, then you could say that the earth, because the physical realm has largely run its course and it's into a decline. So if you think that you're going to find the new evolutionary impulses deriving it out of the physical world, you're entirely corrupted in your thinking with illusions, because this is going, it's already entered into its decline, and now there's new being that comes into being that will ultimately result at the end of Earth evolution in what's called a phantom physical. That's a physical being, but of a very refined, more etherealized nature. That's a fluid diamond, so to speak, that we will evolve into as a presage of what will come into being when, as St. Paul said, "You shall be as the angels when we enter into the Jupiter evolution." And so there's very much that we're working towards, and it behooves oneself to be very patient in approaching these ideas and let them plant them as seeds in you, because they're riddles. So many times I'll read Steiner and I'll think, aha, that's what he means. And then years later, I'll be reading a passage and find out that it's exactly the opposite of what I thought. But because I may have skewed something regarding its relationship to that particular time period, or even within a period of human life, so that you see that there's these cyclical activities. Like you could look back in 7-year cycles in your own life and see what's going on today, and then see how that is a karmic, there's a certain elasticity. The past reaches towards the present and surrounds us with karma, and there's a certain importance to the 7-year cycle, so that you go back and you contemplate what happened 7 years previously to a particular event. It'd be very telling regarding the karma that is surrounding you through but metamorphosed by the elemental beings, and the spiritual beings behind the appearance of the world. But even if you go to the physicist Max Planck, I was just reading a quotation somebody posted on Facebook that I had forgotten about. But yeah, where he basically, and it's a beautiful quote, I'll bring it to our little forum here some other time. I don't want to dig into my phone right now, but he basically comes to the conclusion that for things to exist, to him it implies that there's beings involved, that it isn't just something that mechanistically arose out of chemistry, and so that's an important individual to be able to affirm. Likewise, Albert Einstein, he went to visit Peter Dunoff, and Peter Dunoff is one of the leading Christian initiates that Rudolf Steiner even points towards him. He was an initiate in Bensaduno, he was known as in Bulgaria. And then, of course, there's Stylianos Ateslis, the Daskalos of Cyprus. He was a very significant individual. What's interesting about these beings is that both of them say, well, if you want further details, just go study Rudolf Steiner. So there's a connectedness as you approach these subjects. When you're getting into the school of thought and the school of Dionysius, which is the school to where these spiritual beings are examined in a threefold way because they're real, that is the esoteric Christian stream. And that's what's going to be able to redeem Americans from subnature and the English from their emphasis on materiality.
I should have guessed that was a cue. Yeah, I mean, I find depictions of the British in the Star Trek universe depressing, because we're clearly the Ferengi. And I've got proof. I've got proof of that. I mean, you get people like Patrick Stewart, one of the great actors of of his generation, of our time, going over there talking about the Grand Negus who leads the Ferengi. Yeah, come on, that's my generation, Pat. There used to be something called the Antiques Roadshow in this country, Sunday evening viewing, and Arthur Negus, was the guy that went around the country giving valuations to people's antiques. So that's where the Grand Negus clearly comes from. You know, and never underrate British actors. They get their 5 penn'orth worth. So, you know, and the Russians are clearly the Klingons, you know, bloody calm down. You can't even have a rational conversation with you. So I think that's clear. And but I think we can all deal with them. I mean, in the Star Trek universe, of course, the Federation and these bloody Klingons, they all become mates in the end. It's the evil Borg you can't actually trust. They've given up their very souls to become a collective. Oh my God, I know what country that's thinking about. So, you know, the terror of the Far East and Bulldog Drummond and Nayland Smith and Fu Manchu. So, yeah, the Star Trek universe intrigues me. I just wish the Brits hadn't ended up the Ferengi. You know, sell their grandparents into slavery for a quick buck. Therefore, I'm not going to argue with that. All I'm going to say is there are exceptions, and I hope I'm one of them. Kali Yuga. It always amazes me that my Western friends, I've never spoken to you about it on or off air, so I don't know if you think this. They always think Kali Yuga is just about to finish, whereas all of my Hindu and Buddhist friends think it's just beginning to settle in. I'm really sort of tempted to go for the latter rather than the former. By the way, John and viewers, if the screen keeps coming backwards and forwards, it's because I'm in a hotel room at the minute. I'm not at home on my laptop, and I can't rest. I can't find a nice place to pivot my elbow so I can hold the phone. So that's why I keep getting larger and smaller and moving about. My apologies. So Kali Yuga, yeah, I mean, that would explain a great deal, of course, including the completely rewriting of gender, which actually began as a series of very intelligent discussions and now seems to have surrendered entirely into the fashion of the moment. That's depressing. I mean, why did gender arise, to my understanding, as an issue at all? Because you had something called the Human Genome Project that started mapping the entire DNA structure of the human body, and to their amazement, they started discovering there were male and female brains, irrespective of the gender of the body they were housed in. So that's how all this started. But then, of course, various universities, I won't mention Minnesota, but they know who I mean, you know, they decided that's good to cash in, so made these inflammatory statements. I'd have done the same. If I was the rector, I'd have done the same. We need more bums on seats in this institution. Let's make a row. I'd have done the same. So, you know, but it doesn't help when you're dealing with the mysteries of science, and I do think there are mysteries of science. In other words, the sorts of things we won't get answers to easily. Kali Yuga. So that would explain, I suppose, a bit if we were only really just beginning to sink into it. Because if I remember those terrifying Hindu stories about when people are midway into Kali Yuga, things like gender have actually disappeared. People are actually about 2 to 3 foot in height, if I remember properly. They're short, and the maximum lifespan, the average lifespan, is about 25 years. Because Kali Yuga is what it says it is, the age of destruction. Krishna has left the world temporarily because that's not part of the cycle he wants. He wants to bring around the end of certain things for the joy of the new creation, as you were talking about earlier. I mean, that sort of used to bring to mind various mathematicians, which some of which, of course, are visionary. You know, to caricature them. To caricature them as sort of old boffins just sat with, mind you, I've got receding hair nowadays, with receding hair doing their mathematics and maybe getting it right or getting it wrong. That's too much of a caricature. If I'm thinking of someone like Cantor, who talks about transfinite mathematics, the infinity of infinities, you know, and his followers saying that he's revealed heaven to them, that, my God, if ever there was an interesting metaphor, it's that one. You know, science is many things. You know, this is what the show's circling today, John. Science is many things. It's not just one thing, and there are many ways to do it. And reductive materialism is merely one of them. Which leads me, I suppose, to one last thought before I hand it back. We've never actually got a show onto sci-fi yet, and I'm not the world's biggest devotee of sci-fi, even though we're both bibliomancers, and I know you and I have flown in various starships to get on top of that particular genre. I just find most sci-fi inept. You know, there's the hero, there's the girl, there's the alien, biff, and then the alien's on the floor and everybody's happy at the end. No, I mean, and I'm thinking of very happy childhood memories, by the way, of Dan Dare in that legendary comic, The Eagle. Shakespeare and Company of Paris, I know you still have copies. Do not sell them. I will buy them. Do not sell them. The minute I can, I'm coming over to buy them. I mean, that was the best example. I mean, wasn't he something in the RAF? Dan Dare with his Batman, what was it, Digby, the short, fat guy who looked after the gentleman. My God, that stuff has aged. And, you know, you had his arch enemy, the Mekon. Wasn't he from Venus or something? I can't remember. You know, this short thing with an absolutely huge head with thousands of muscle-bound soldiers. And at the end of every six weeks, Dan Dare would biff him, and that would be the end of all that, and he'd win for Her Majesty the Queen and the Empire. And then, my God, how did that happen? You've got this galactic genius and all these muscly soldiers. How on earth did Dan Dare win? But he always did, so everything went back to normal. I'm not thinking necessarily of that. I'm certainly not thinking of H.G. Wells, or I'm not thinking of visionaries like H.G. Wells. I mean, was he writing science fiction? I think there's a good argument to say, actually, no, he wasn't. He was doing something else. Let's think of religious artists. Oh, God, John, the Martian Chronicles. I had his name a minute ago and it's now gone. Bradbury. Let's think of Ray Bradbury, who is clearly a religious artist more than a sci-fi writer. I remember seeing the series on TV years ago with Rock Hudson. God bless Rock Hudson, poor old Rock Hudson, as sort of one of the pioneers to Mars. It's amazing how we managed to screw things up there as much as we did here. That's depressing. And me thinking, oh, no, some of that's very strange. I need to look at those books. So I went actually for once and did it the other way round and looked at the text, some of which is very strange and very revealing. I mean, the thing that caught my attention was you get missionaries that follow the colonists to Mars. So, and that's at the beginning of neo-colonial criticism. Neo-colonial criticism in the arts goes far too far, but it's absolutely necessary. We need to know the shortcomings of frames of reference. That's absolutely necessary. So it's ironic that you get missionaries accompanying the colonists to Mars. And one of the fathers, it's unclear as far as I recall whether it's a Catholic father, is praying to a figure of Christ, which is perfectly okay. And of course, we took our diseases with them, which is why I was reminded of H.G. Wells, which killed the Martian population, these tiny, delicate little fairy tale creatures. And those that could ascended the physical body. They left it behind them. And they became something like blue fire. In other words, fields of consciousness. I thought that was interesting. One of them passes through the church where the priest is praying and catches the thought of the priest and instantly identifies as a bleeding, dying Jesus and screams to the priest, "What have you done to me? What have you done to me? You have caused this." And the priest can't even look at the bleeding figure of Jesus and says, "Enough, go away. No, I didn't mean it. I meant something else." Any Christian reading that book must feel chastised. We still leave Jesus on the cross. We leave him there in pain. We leave him in suffering, because the last thing we want to do is talk about the resurrection and the victory, and the fact that now it's up to us to do the right thing. Are we really going to follow him and live out what he said? That's what Bradbury's getting at in that little vignette, and that is a wake-up call to all Christians. I'm handing back, John.
Yeah, in the annals of sci-fi, what childhood's end? Yes. Really, if you want to get into that genre, one of the most important figures is David Lindsay, the Scottish writer, and his book A Voyage to Arcturus, that had such a profound influence on C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, Owen Barfield, that whole circle of the Inklings. It's definitely a masterpiece. There's Colin Wilson called it the greatest novel of the 20th century. And Clive Barker called it a masterpiece, an extraordinary work, quite magnificent. And it's regarding an interstellar voyage. So there's a lot of food for thought. And one can explore any avenue one wishes to explore. Keep in mind that in getting into the ideas of shall and must, again, your Calvinism, that's your must. And the whole idea of predestination, that it's already determined who's going to be saved and who isn't. And Rudolf Steiner said, well, that could be true for some people. Some people are not going to avail themselves of giving birth to childhood's end, to where they actually take up their position as a free, conscious, spiritual being. And so that they end up falling into the snares of Kismet because they don't rise to the occasion. So that fate becomes a reality. And it's interesting because Rudolf Steiner said that really the only writer coming out of that Protestant milieu that was able to reconcile the concepts of prophecy and predestination and free will was Jakob Böhme, and the shoemaker from Görlitz, who's a remarkable individual. I had the William Law edition. I had to let it go fairly recently because of certain financial concerns, but he's been somebody that I've drawn as a source of inspiration for many years, and he's very significant under the inspiration of Christian Rosenkreuz, the Rosicrucian stream. But yeah, in coming to understand how we can approach this, it takes a certain courage to be able to take up the challenge. But if I might, all around us, people talk of human ideals, yet what these ideals actually contain is nothing. They're the hollow sounds of words, for humanity now is in need of a new constitution of soul. Once upon a time, a call was heard by humanity, which in our language we may translate as follows: change your mind, for the time is fulfilled. He's making reference there to John the Baptist saying metanoia, which they generally translate repent, repent. But it's changing your way of thinking, changing the way you look at the world and the way you observe your actions, and making this impulse from God the central source of your experience of the world and of others, right? So change your mind, for the time is fulfilled. In those times, people were still able to change their mind based on old soul constitutions. But that is no longer possible. If that demand of old is to be fulfilled now, it must be done out of a new constitution of soul. Michael brought the Yahweh tradition, the Yahweh influence to human beings. Since the end of the 1870s, he has been proceeding to bring us an understanding of the Christ impulse in the true sense of the word, if only we are able to go out towards him. It is up to us to do this. We go out towards him by fulfilling two things. And so an example of that, it's to be able to bring this type of an approach to the way in which we view the world, and to be able to come to a threefold understanding that there's a balance that we occupy between two realms of supersensible beings, and that Christ impulse is that's what gives us strength, because we that Christ is infinitely more powerful than the opposing powers. And you see, you make the distinction between a microcosmic principle and a macrocosmic principle, so that the microcosmic principle has to do with something that one can receive, like were one to begin to unfold in advance of mankind higher principles, they wouldn't be your principles, because you're not there yet. See, you don't get to the next stage until you get to Jupiter. Then it can become your principle. Right now, the principle that is ours is the ego. And that is that realm in which nobody can come between you and Christ. You can walk away, you can ignore it, but it's something that you receive through Christ. And Christ is, he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but through me. So he's our gateway to that which is infinitely more powerful than these adversaries. Although they've been around a long time and they are quite powerful, but not in the face of Christ. And so you have Michael now as the countenance of Christ, whereas in the Old Testament times he was the countenance of Jehovah Elohim, the highest level of being that's able to act directly into the realm of space and time. Now we have the Son principle, which is that principle of the Word coming into a human form at the baptism in the river, and creating this example for mankind of, he says, and greater things than these shall you do, right? And if you go through like the Gospel of Mark and you see all the magisterial things that he does in driving out demons and healing leper and making a blind man see, that these are all things that can be not something that you strive for, but that are fruits of that relationship. So you look at someone like Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, who did great many healings. And although our soul constitution isn't such as it was at the time of Bernard of Clairvaux, but nonetheless, that there's a potency in bringing oneself into relationship to the Christ impulse. And it becomes particularly strong as we move into the Easter season, to where that great offering of blood came into the earthly realm. And so in entering into the earthly realm, you have to keep in mind that the sacred nature of the blood, that's something that is critical to your relationship to Christ. And so you want to protect your blood.
Yeah, I mean, we've got our Easter service next Sunday, so I'll be my customarily 30 minutes late. I'll warn you now, because I have to get back from the church to do the show. Oh gosh, I think to finish up the sci-fi thing, I think Jules Verne is the other author that clearly isn't writing science fiction but something else. And that's not to minimize the genre. It's just not the genre I'm most comfortable with for reasons I've explained. Excuse me. Oh, I'm sorry to hear you're selling treasured properties. Alas, I have to do the same from time to time to keep the wolf from the door. I had a collection of hundreds of books a couple of years ago that have been minimized to 100 or so. I'm hoping that I can finally stop doing that. But anyway, we'll see what the next couple of months holds. Jacob Böhm. Oh, that is pure white magic. That is Lutheran pure white magic. I think we need a whole show dedicated to that rather than just a couple of comments. I mean, certainly the ultimate mysteries of light and sound are running all the way through that book. And basically it's a Aurora, and it's basically a map of how to achieve God consciousness. If that's not white magic, I don't know what is. I mean, that is extraordinary. And I think that's what's left the church uneasy, quite wrongly on their part, the church uneasy with that masterpiece of introspection, that masterpiece of prayer, and that masterpiece of meditation. As I was saying earlier, the church throws away these treasures at its peril. You know, is it some guy spouting doctrines that he may or may not understand at the front of a congregation? Is it groups of fathers getting together, normally with immense political and economic pressure on them to reach a particular decision? Most of the ecumenical councils don't impress me for the simple reason, was the Holy Spirit involved? Absolutely no doubt. But was it listened to? That's a different question. You know, and if you've got various Roman emperors surrounding the building with armed soldiers, I dare say the answer might be maybe as opposed to yes. Tell me, Father, as I'm drawing my sword out of its scabbard, what did the voting do? You know, I mean, you've got to be realistic about these things. Also, what was it, Maximus, St. Maximus? Theology without love is the theology of the demons. You know, there we are. That's the end of it from a saint. And that's the truth of it. Are you living the life that Christ said? Are you pursuing love? Are you pursuing truth? If not, you're not a Christian. You're not doing the Christian thing. And that's the end of it. Oh, I don't. You've got me in one of those days where I want to say lots about everything, but I've got to, and also my mind's on tomorrow, so I've got to keep myself under control a bit. And we're coming up to that time. No, I'll leave that there. John. I'll pass back to you because I'm just about to launch on a tirade.
Those who are wondering, this is the book that I was reading from of Rudolf Steiner's Michael's Mission, Revealing the Essential Secrets of Human Nature. And that's a wonderful, wonderful book. Well, we're getting near the end here, and so I want to make sure that I remind you that Reverend David William Parry's books are available on Amazon and other websites too, I guess. But here's The Grammar of Witchcraft, which is a wonderful Shakespearean study. A haunting conceit, according to that scholar. And there's also Caliban's Redemption, the Shakespearean-esque versification of Reverend David. And his masterwork, of course, is Mount Athos Inside Me, Essays on Religion, Swedenborg and the Arts, edited by the very, very talented Daniela Irandust. And like I said, those are available on Amazon. And my books, of course, the first volume is The Arcana of the Grail Angel, The Spiritual Science of the Holy Blood and of the Holy Grail, a study developed out of the work of Rudolf Steiner of the underground streams of esoteric Christianity, which flowed from the Brotherhood of the Holy Grail to the Order of the Knights Templar and the True Rosicrucian Order. And I have a limited number of copies of this available. I never show the back, but there. This is what we're working on, just in case you wondered. And there's a great many diagrams, it's 640 pages. And the sequel is The Arcana of Light on the Path, which is more of a meditative tool. And included in both are extensive series of diagrams that can help you discern what we're trying to discuss here from my vantage point, based upon, to a large part, the diagrams of Ehrenfried Pfeiffer that I built upon, starting from them, something that came across my desk many years ago, and I made notes, and it ultimately evolved into those two humble contributions. And those are available on eBay. Unfortunately, the links are not working for eBay on Facebook or on YouTube, but that's okay, because you can click on my link below for my archive, or my, my academia website, and that will lead you to the links that can get you to the books. And you can also download for free at Academia, on my Academia page, the contribution by William Bento to my second book, the foreword that he wrote, that does a kind of an examination of my first book and the significance of it. And those, like I said, are available on eBay. You can also just look them up under my name in Arcana on eBay and find them in the US. If you're outside the US, of course, you can contact me directly through the Academia page or through Facebook. And a lot of people are sending me videos and stuff like that on Facebook. I can't keep up with all that. I'm sorry. My time's so limited. If you send me something and I don't get around to it, please don't be looked askance. But boy, that's bad grammar. But in any event, I'm not looking askance on you. I'm just I haven't been able to process everything, but that's okay. And so that being said, we're getting towards the end here, and David has a big day coming up for him on the morrow, and he has many things to attend to, I'm sure. And so we should let him kind of put a cap on the end of this. He usually likes to get in the last word and then share one of his inspired, spontaneous prayers.
Oh, I'm really, really sad you think I try and get in the last word. I'll have to try and put a stop to that. It's certainly, just to finish the Jakob Böhm thing, mapping out what we would call white magic is no mean feat, and it clearly is white magic. It always astonishes me there are so many books on the black arts and so few on the white arts. I mean, that needs redressing. No, I think I'll leave it there today. I mean, there's so much I want to say, but of course I've got my Sybil partnership tomorrow. So apart from the fact my mind is literally all over the place, and this phone is just about to break my thumb because I can't hold it in this position much longer, I think we'll actually get to the time of prayer. Dear friends, my dear friend John, viewers, listeners, it's Palm Sunday, of course, today. A time that should give all of us great concern. It's a time of reflection where we need to remember that on one weekend, on 1 week, there were people waving palms as the Prince of Peace entered into Jerusalem, but roughly a week later were driving nails into palms because they didn't like what he was saying. Let's try and find the Christ light more clearly in the darkness that surrounds us. Let's find it in the relationships of love that surround us. Let's find it in every opportunity for truth, which includes the sciences. And let's find it in those divine moments where love and truth come together in our prayer to the All Highest. My blessing in the days and the week ahead, and please pray for me at an incredible day, an incredible event of my own tomorrow. God bless you all.
Amen. Thank you, David. And thanks everybody for coming from around the world. And we bid you adieu.